This is the Highly Sensitive Club, episode number 11. Have you been told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, or too much? Do you have big feelings and deep thoughts you don't always know what to do with? I'm Stephanie Lynn, a certified life coach and highly sensitive person. I've helped dozens of highly sensitive clients feel more energized, more confident, and more in control of their high sensitivity. In these episodes, you'll get the information and inspiration to level up your life as a highly sensitive person too. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Club. Highly sensitive person. Today's episode of the Highly Sensitive Club continues my series on common highly sensitive person problems and how to stop or overcome them. And I have a funny story from the last couple of episodes too, because in the previous episode, I covered how to overcome procrastination. And I mentioned in that one that it was not perfectionism, but in the previous episode, I had talked about perfectionism. Yet in the episode, I called it procrastination. And I'm listening to it back and I'm thinking, should I go and re-record it again? And then I thought, no, this is how you overcome perfectionism. You let it be messy, you let it be incorrect, and trust that your audience is smart and that they know what you're talking about and that they're going to know you meant perfectionism instead of procrastination. So here we are. I'm a living embodiment of letting go of perfectionism in this particular instance, in the interest of continuing to share this message with you and continuing to teach you some things that I hope will really help you in your life as a highly sensitive person. So today's episode was definitely inspired by the recent class I taught all about highly sensitive people a couple weeks ago. And the number one thing that my class participants wrote down and they took notes on and wanted more information about and asked a lot of questions about was on boundaries, and particularly how to say no without feeling guilty. What this really boils down to is how to stop people pleasing, which is the name of the episode. People pleasing is behaving in a way that's intended to make others feel a certain way, usually good, at the expense of what we really want or what we really need. As highly sensitive people, we tend to be hypervigilant of other people's moods and emotions. And we try to anticipate and we try to mitigate any negative or uncomfortable emotions that they might be feeling. We're trying to control the circumstances before they get too scary for us because we're afraid of how we're going to feel about someone else's reaction. So many of us highly sensitive people, or HSPs, feel obligated to say yes to anything and everything that people ask of us if it seems like it's reasonable and if it's something that we think we can do pretty easily or reasonably well, because we're hoping that we can help people feel good and we don't have to deal with any uncomfortable emotions. Our default mode is to say yes and to try to squeeze yet another thing into our already full schedules, even when we really don't want to. That's when you can tell it's people pleasing, when you really don't want to do this thing. You're probably thinking something in the moment like, I'll just do it this one time and then I'll come up with an excuse the next time, because you didn't want to take the time to think up a good reason, quote unquote, now. And then, of course, the next time rolls around and you haven't thought about it and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have another excuse. I'm going to have to do it again. Why do I keep doing this to myself? Sounding familiar? You might be thinking, it's easier if I just take care of it myself. This is actually probably not true for you to just take care of it yourself, because it's easier for the other person, but it's not easier for you. You're the one going out of your way and putting all this extra effort into something someone asked you. You might be thinking, I already know how to do this and it would take longer to explain it to someone else. I'm going to borrow an old rule that I learned in my organizing career, which is, yes, if you can do something one time, 100%, that's wonderful. But if you can teach someone else to do it to 80% of your standards and they can do it 4 times, that's 320% versus your 100%. So it's not necessarily true that just because you already know how to do something, it'll be easier to do it yourself. In fact, you might actually get more done when you learn how to delegate to someone else. And you might also be thinking, I really don't want to do this, but this person is important to me, or I want them to like me. I want them to respect me. I want them to spend time with me. So I'll agree to it this time and we'll see how it goes, right? And then we act like we're not allowed to change our minds. If you are a chronic people pleaser, you're probably one of the first ones to jump in and try to save the day or fix things or provide a helpful answer or pitch in with your time or your energy or your attention, if not your money and your wallet too. In the short term, this helps you feel liked or admired. It helps you feel like you belong and you're accepted, which is a motivation for this podcast in and of itself. A lot of us highly sensitive people feel like we're kind of on the outside looking in, and I want you to feel like you're part of something, that you belong here because you do. So we people please to get the short-term effect that we think we'll feel like we'll belong and we're accepted, but in the long term, it creates feelings of resentment, exhaustion. You might feel spiteful, and sometimes you might be downright angry that other people aren't putting in as much effort as you are. Except the funny thing is, number one, they probably never asked you to put in as much effort as you're putting into it. You're the one who's going above and beyond. And number two, if you're not communicating to them that you want them to contribute or you want them to do something else, they're never going to know. You haven't asked them or communicated to them that you want them to pitch in as much as you're pitching in. You're trying to hero all by yourself. So of course people aren't going to know that you want them to contribute as much, and you're creating your own feelings of resentment and obligation and guilt. Now, even if you are a chronic people pleaser, you can start to shift this habit today. Yes, today, even if it's just a baby step in the right direction, because this is something that if you've built this up over decades, it's going to take you some time to rewire and rework, but you can do it. Absolutely. You deserve as much care and support as everyone else. And that starts with you showing up for yourself, my dear highly sensitive person. You teach people how to treat you, as the adage goes. And if you're treating yourself like you're the last priority, everyone else will too. And they're going to dump all of their stuff on you. It's because you're treating yourself that way. When you treat yourself with care and support and respect as well, you teach other people to do the same. Now, I know that you're kind and compassionate and empathetic and generous. You want to be able to help someone feel a little less alone. You want to help them get something done faster, or you want to surprise someone in a really thoughtful way because those are your gifts. And I want you to know you can be present with others, and you maybe even can lend a hand without needing to people please. So what I said was, it's okay for you to just be with other people without doing anything in order for them to like you. And if you do lend a hand, you don't have to people please while you're doing it. You don't have to donate to your friend's fundraiser or go out to an expensive restaurant if you're choosing to put your money into something else. Maybe that's saving for a vacation or just practicing having money. That's actually my growth edge right now, is practicing how much capacity I have to have and hold money. So yeah, sometimes it is hard to go out, but sometimes I also plan for it too. So it just depends on what's working for you in your life and what you want. You don't have to say yes to a group hangout if you would rather just have some really deep connecting one-on-one time with a cup of tea and have your dog or your cats around. You don't have to pick up the phone at any hour just because someone you care about is calling. Now, yes, there might be exceptions to this rule where your kid or your partner needs you at a time that's kind of unusual and you pick up the phone. But for the most part, you don't have to answer things in the middle of the night. You don't have to answer text messages at any time. You don't have to pick up your phone every time it rings or dings so that you can check the latest thing if you're trying to focus on something else. You can make time for the people you care about while also taking care of the things that you love and care about and want to do too. Now, there are 3 problems with people pleasing that you have probably not thought about, but you're probably feeling the effects. So I want to bring these things up for you to raise your awareness, because this really is kind of a sneaky, insidious problem to do people pleasing, and it causes a lot of other issues in your life. The number 1 problem is that it's a form of hiding. When you are people pleasing, often it's because you're afraid to share who you really are and what you really want. And this can be really damaging for us, for our mental health and for our internal self-esteem, if you want to call it that, because we long to be accepted for who we are. And not being vulnerable and honest means that you're not sharing who you really are with the people that you care about and want to love and respect you the most. Even when doing it makes you question whether the other person would really love, like, or respect you, if that's the case, then those are not the kind of people you want to spend your time with anyway. If you're afraid that not doing something will change someone's opinion of you, that's something you need to examine, and that might not be someone who needs to be in your life, because people who really love and care about you are not going to care whether you show up to help them move because they didn't want to hire movers, or whether you're going to continue to do your own thing on your Saturday afternoon. It can also lead to imposter syndrome, which is an entirely separate episode too. I'm just full of creativity lately, and I'm like, oh, that's another episode too. I got to talk about that. When you're constantly doing actions and behaving in a way that doesn't feel true to who you are, you create a pattern in your mind that says, I have to continue to be this person, this mask, this fake version of myself in order to be loved and accepted. And it creates that imposter syndrome in yourself, which is the fear that someone will figure out you're a fraud or that you're not really who you say you are. So you're creating that for yourself when you're not showing up with your full authenticity and who you really want to be. It takes some courage to show up and be yourself, but people who really love and care about you are going to love you and care about you even more for your honesty and your transparency. It can also lead to perfectionism and procrastination, because when you're people pleasing, oftentimes you're trying to do the quote unquote right thing, totally perfectionism, so that you get a particular result out of the other person, which you can't control. And if you don't want to do it, then you'll end up procrastinating because you're avoiding doing the thing you didn't want to do in the first place. When you're hiding from yourself and from others, you're trying to control someone else's emotions or their responses to you so that you don't have to feel a negative way, whether that's hurt or rejected or disappointed. So you end up hiding from both yourself and the other person. That's pretty deep stuff, and it really does come from people pleasing. So this is a lot more damaging than you might think it is. The second problem with this is that it means you abdicate responsibility for making your own decisions and standing up for what you really want. You make it someone else's responsibility to give you what you want and to stand up for you. They're busy doing that for themselves. If you're not standing up for yourself, no one is going to stand up for you. If you don't take the time to determine what your preferences and your desires and your boundaries are, which again, whole other episode, then you're abdicating that responsibility and you're giving all this power to someone else that you don't have any control over, because the only person you have control over is yourself. So it disempowers you to people please because it feeds into an idea that your primitive brain has that you need to be someone else to deserve love or respect or consideration or attention or quality time with someone. And when you're not determining who you want to be and what you want and how you want to show up in your relationships, you're constantly on default and you're not making those decisions for yourself. You're outsourcing them to someone else. So while you're outsourcing your decisions and your preferences to someone else, you're also outsourcing your sense of well-being, your sense of contentment, and your sense of happiness to others' reactions to you. Isn't that crazy? What you can choose and decide for yourself, you're abdicating. You're saying, nope, I don't want to deal with that. I'll just let other people decide. So other people's reactions determine how you feel about yourself. This is not a good recipe for healthy relationships for you or for your loved ones. Don't abdicate your responsibility to make decisions for yourself. Because even if it feels scary and even if you don't yet know how to decide what you want, it's a skill that you can develop and you can practice. And I promise you this, because I was one of those people too who didn't know what I wanted and who constantly did this. It also creates analysis paralysis because you have so many options at your disposal and you're so worried about what's the other person going to think and how should I react and what does my action affect them and on myself. Then you end up getting stuck. You freeze because you have so many options and you don't know what to pick because you're not taking the time to decide for yourself. So it creates all these issues. You're hiding from yourself and you're not making decisions and you're disempowering yourself. In addition, you also disempower the other person when you're people pleasing and when you're not making decisions for yourself. Because people pleasing often comes back to either being afraid of someone else's opinions of you or you're afraid to hurt their feelings. And the more you swoop in and the more you try to save other people, the more it sends the signal to them that you don't trust them to figure things out for themselves or to learn new things for themselves. It shows that you think you're more competent than them, so you need to handle everything because they're not able to do it. This is probably not an intentional signal that you're trying to send, but it is a signal that people pick up on that, oh, well, they always just try to do it themselves anyway, so I might as well not even bother. You teach people how to treat you. So you're teaching people that you don't trust them to take care of themselves. You're trying to spare their feelings, but you're doing it at the expense of the deeper connection that you can get when you trust someone and you challenge them to become a better version of themselves. You're denying them the opportunity to become a more competent, more capable person. Now, as I mentioned, I was a chronic people pleaser. I couldn't even decide what I wanted for dinner from night to night. So I was constantly abdicating my own responsibility, hiding out who I really was, not really facing who I was, not deciding who I wanted to be and what I wanted. And this caused a lot of pain in my relationships too, because I was constantly waiting for my romantic partners or my friends or even my family members to decide things for me so that I didn't have to do it myself. And on the one hand, that gave me the benefit that I was never quote unquote wrong. So I didn't have to deal with that pain, but it did cause a lot of other pain. And I actually lost some friendships because I wasn't willing or able, I didn't have the skills at the time to take responsibility for myself. And so I constantly acted like a victim and like I didn't have any control. And so I needed other people to step in and fix and make decisions for me. And then I would just show up and people please for them, trying to make sure that they liked me and stuck around. This did not work. And I have learned over the last 10 years that it is a skill that you can learn to stop people pleasing, but to be more decisive, to stand up for your own desires, and to be an advocate for yourself, because ultimately that creates stronger, deeper, more powerful relationships with others. Now, I take total responsibility for my actions, my words, my thoughts, and my emotions. And actually, I had a great conversation with my best friend who tells me now that sometimes she thinks about what I would do when she's in tricky situations. That isn't that bonkers? I used to be a person who fell prey to all of these common highly sensitive blocks. And now I'm actually someone who inspires people around me to stick up for themselves. That is just mind blowing to me. We were actually at this cute little tea shop about a year and a half ago, and it wasn't the kind where they sell cups of tea. They actually sell like loose leaf and bag tea, and you could go into this little converted house and buy tea. And we were looking around, and the shop owner gave us this personal tour and told us all about these special packages she had. And I'm a tea drinker, so I already have enough tea to last me for half a year if I'm drinking 2 cups a day. I have plenty of tea. And I get tea as gifts because I love tea so much. So I decided it's a cute little shop, but I would really like to go out to the patio where the sun is shining and there's all these beautiful plants, and I'm ready to be done browsing the shop. So as I was leaving, the shop owner said, "Don't you want to buy anything? Don't you want to purchase anything?" And I said, "No, thank you. I've got plenty of tea, but I'll keep you in mind for when I'm ready to purchase some more." And I didn't really think anything of it, except that I left my friend in the tea shop and then she felt very awkward. But it just felt so natural for me to say, I don't need what you're offering right now, but I'll keep you in mind for later. And I know that 10 years ago, I probably would have bought something out of obligation just because I felt so guilty that this woman paid all this time and attention to me. I completely would have been a people pleaser. And I have to say too that I still face people pleasing too. I'm still a highly sensitive person. I still have these things, even though I've learned to deal with a lot of these things and can manage them faster than I used to or have ever before. I still have invitations to give away a lot of free stuff for other people in relationships that don't feel very mutual to me. I still get invitations to go and do things that just don't feel good at the time, even if they seem really great. Like, I might want to do a game day or hang out with people in a group, but I might just not have the energy for it that day, and I want to do it again later. So knowing these things about myself allows me to overcome my impulse to people please, which never really goes away entirely, especially if you have decades of experience with people pleasing, but it does allow you to catch it and to become aware of it and to make a different choice in the moment. And I do that every single day still. Literally every day when I'm faced with the choice of challenging one of my coaching mentees or trying to make them feel better and boost them up. Or if someone offers to do a service for me and I think, oh, I'd really like to do that, but I'm focusing on this other thing right now. It still comes up and you can still learn to use these skills every single day. So there are 4 things that you can do that I want you to take away today so that you too can stop people pleasing, stop hiding from yourself, stop disempowering yourself, stop disempowering others, and to give yourself what you really want, which is the confidence to speak up for yourself and to feel empowered that what you want and desire and who you're being is good enough, that you're worthy of love and respect and attention and time. So the first thing I want you to do is give yourself a moment to pause and reflect before you say yes. Don't say yes, don't say no. Just give yourself a little bit of breathing room, and you'll actually get faster at this over time as you practice. So here are some scripts that you can say that can be really helpful for this. Number 1 is, let me check my calendar and get back to you. Now, if you want to create a little bit of urgency, you can also say, let me check my calendar, let me check my schedule and get back to you by tonight at the end of the day, or let me get back to you tomorrow. And this puts the other person at ease because they know when they should hear from you or when they can check in. And it also helps you have a little bit of pressure to make that decision for yourself so that you're not just leaving it in limbo. And then that weird thing happens where you just haven't talked to them and haven't talked to them. And then the longer you go on not talking to them, the more awkward it feels and the less you want to talk to them. Let's not get into this thought loop, this very common highly sensitive person thought loop. Let's just tell them, let me check when I have a moment to reflect and I'll get back to you by whatever time. You might also think about it and say, you know what, this might be a good fit, but I'm not sure. So you might say, I need a bit more info to decide. Can you send me some details? And this opens up the opportunity for the other person to send you a text or an email where you can see in a written form all the details, spend a little time thinking about it. And if you have some more questions you want to ask them, this is a great opportunity to do it in a way where you have lots of spaciousness if you're feeling anxious about having a live conversation about it. It's totally okay to switch to email or text instead. And that way you can still follow up, you can still get the details, you can ask the questions and make an informed decision without feeling pressure. If you're feeling bold, which I often do after all of these years of practice, you might say something like, I don't know if that's something I have capacity for right now, but I will think about it and I'll get back to you. This is such a respectful thing to say because instead of lying and saying, oh gosh, I'm just so busy right now, or oh, I don't know how I'm going to fit the time in for that. You know how it goes. You don't need to use the busy badge of honor as an excuse for you just simply not having the time or energy or desire to do something. You can be authentic. You can be in integrity. You can be respectful of you and the other person and just be honest without there being anything about it. And if the other person's upset, it's not your problem. But it's kind. It's actually kind and respectful to say, I don't know if that's something I have in me right now, but I will think about it and I'll get back to you at X time. So in addition to giving yourself a little bit of breathing room before you say yes or no, the second thing, of course, you need to do is decide what you really want and what you really like about the situation or how you want to show up. Now, I want you to think about if the other person's opinion of you were going to be the same no matter what. If they were going to love you and respect you and just think you were absolutely fantastic, whether you said yes or no, which one would you choose? Because oftentimes it's that fear of the other person judging us or being disappointed with us or thinking something about us that keeps us from actually choosing what we want to do. So if you took that out of the equation and just assumed that they're going to think well of you no matter what, which one would you choose? Another question to ask yourself when you're deciding is, what's your opinion of yourself if you say yes or if you say no? I use this one all the time, like especially because I've mentioned in previous podcasts that I love to drive. And people on the road have very firm opinions about how things should be happening, regardless of whether those are actual traffic laws or not. And anytime somebody gets upset with me when I'm on the road, which is one of my favorite times when I'm driving around, I'm moving, I'm getting my creative juices flowing, I'm going somewhere I'm excited about, and somebody gets mad, I think, do I like the way that I showed up to that situation? Do I like the action I took? Do I like what I did? If the answer is yes, then it doesn't matter what the other person thought. If the answer is no, then I can learn from that and I can make another decision later. I still face this every single day, just like you. Another question to ask yourself is, does saying yes mean that I have to give something up that's important to me? Whether that's my energy, my time, my money, my attention, or my opinion of myself. If I say yes to this obligation, if I say yes to doing this thing, to running this errand, to doing this favor for this person, does that mean I have to give up something else that's really important to me? And it is okay to say no if you really want to value your own energy, time, money, attention, and opinion. Those things are wonderful. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you selfish. It just means that you're taking good care of yourself, just like everyone else is. I also want you to weigh the options too. So as you're making decisions, is this someone I care about? How do I want to show up for this person? Is this a mutual relationship or is this a one-sided request? So there are some different factors that as a highly sensitive person, you're looking for the nuances and the details. And you can ask yourself these questions to determine, is this really worth it to me? Because when you're a chronic people pleaser, it probably feels like everything is of equal priority. Anytime somebody asks you for something, you automatically say yes, and you don't have another option. But ultimately you do. How important is this relationship to you? How do you want to show up to it? And is this a person who's constantly asking you to give and give and give while they take and take and take? Or is this someone who gives as much to you and maybe you do decide that you want to repay the favor for them in this way? So once you have taken a breather, decided what you want, then you move on to step 3, which is to communicate your preferences and or to start a conversation. So here are some more scripts because I find that hearing words to say is really, really helpful. So all of these things can help you initiate conversations, whichever thing you choose. You might say, I would be happy to help you with whatever it is, but I'm only available during these times, or I'm only available to do this much. So you're setting some limits on how much you're willing to give instead of saying, absolutely, whatever you want, I'm there, and then giving too much of yourself. If you decide that you are willing to help and you want to add some limits or stipulations, or you want to show up in a particular way, you can also say, absolutely, and here's what I'm willing to help with. Does that align with your goals? And then whether they say yes or no, you've showed up the way that you wanted to show up. Does that align with your goals? And then let them decide. You could also say, I would really love to help because I care about you, but I want to make sure that this works for both of us. Do you have time for a conversation so we can hash out all the details? That is a great conversation starter because it just reiterates for the person that you do care about them and you are thinking about this, but you need more details or you need a little bit more of a conversation to figure out what's going to work for both of you. This is a very kind and respectful thing to do. You might also say, I would love to help, but I'm just not available right now. That is such a simple, clear, respectful thing to say. I actually say this all the time because available could mean a lot of things. So it's a very versatile word to use, but it also means that you don't have to explain yourself. If you don't have the time or the energy or the money or the desire to do something that someone is asking you, it's okay to just say, I'm not available for that right now, even if that's not emotionally available. A very gracious way to say this too is, thank you so much for the offer, but I'm not available for that right now. And then if this is someone you want to continue to ask you about things and it just didn't work at this particular occasion, you can say, I'm not interested in that at the moment, but I would love it if you continue to get in touch with me. I would love it if you keep checking back. Or I'm not interested in this at this time, but I will be in touch with you when I think of something that might be helpful. So you get to set the parameters, whether you want to be the one to check back in or whether you're willing to let the other person keep checking back if this is someone you want to continue to interact with. All of those are great ways to say yes, yes, and I'd like to have a conversation, or no, thank you, but I'm so glad that you thought of me. And then once you have that breathing room, decide what you want, communicate your yes, no, or let's have a conversation, then the 4th step is to detach your emotional state from their response or their reaction. And again, this is a whole other podcast episode about other people's opinions of us. But other people's opinions or their judgments or their feelings are completely outside of our control. So if you're making a lot of your decisions and you're people pleasing based on trying to keep other people's opinions a certain way, then your goal is to raise your own opinion of yourself. Your goal is to ask yourself, am I happy with the way I'm acting in this situation? Is this who I want to be? Is this how I want to be in the world? Don't take responsibility for their emotions, but don't let them take responsibility for yours either. Just make it a very clean interaction with the other person, whether you say yes or no, because ultimately your emotions are your responsibility and their emotions are their responsibility. And whatever they do or say or think is totally their business, and it doesn't have to be yours. So when you try to avoid hurting someone else's feelings, you often end up hurting your own feelings instead. You create this dichotomy where you either have to choose someone else's feelings or you have to choose your own. But that's not true. That is just a choice. You're choosing to see it as, I either do this thing and hurt myself, or I say no and I hurt the other person. It is entirely possible in most circumstances that you can say no and your relationship is exactly the same. Now, there's also a chance, because we have all these fears about what the other person is going to think or do or feel, but there is just as much of a chance, and probably more likely of a chance, depending on the person, that they're going to be totally fine with it. That if you say no, thank you, or I'm not available for that right now, they're going to say, okay, no big deal. And then you might look at them like, what? I got myself all worked up for that. And you just said, oh, no big deal. And then you might get a little bit mad because you did all this shadow boxing in your own head, thinking that they were going to respond a way that they didn't. Wouldn't it be amazing if you just assumed that people are going to accept what you say and they're going to take it respectfully and they're still going to care about you and love you anyway? So, as your action step this week, I want you to think of one thing you would really love to say no to, or something that you already said yes to, but you'd really like to modify so that it can fit the energy and the time and the attention you actually have available right now instead of how much you thought you'd have or how much you wanted to have. I want to invite you to initiate that conversation. And it might sound something like, hey, I've been thinking a lot about whatever the situation is, and I'd like to talk with you about how we can move forward with this. When do you have time to discuss? That is really powerful. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'd like to talk to you about how we can move forward with this in a different way. Or I've been thinking about how I need to move forward with this so that I can keep going. Or I've been thinking about how I can move forward with our relationship without doing this thing. When do you have time to discuss? Now, a key thing here in all of these scripts is not saying, is that okay with you? Or can we work on that? Or what do you think about that? Because ultimately, again, you're still giving all that power to the other person, and you're still abdicating your responsibility to stand in your own decision and deal with your own emotions. So when you initiate this conversation, don't ask them, is it okay with you if we have this conversation? Just assume that they want to have that connection with you and that deep relationship, and they're going to say, yes, absolutely. Let's do it at this time. Just assume that it's going to be a when, not an if. If you're spending all of your time trying to manage other people, other people's thoughts, other people's opinions, no one is looking out for you because that person is probably worrying about themselves and you're worrying about them, and no one's looking out for you. No one's advocating for you. So you can continue to prioritize people pleasing, take on more than you want, burn yourself out trying to be everything to everyone, and let resentment and guilt and obligation rule your life. Or you can do what I do and what my clients do and my friends do, and you can look for those win-wins. You can look for the yes and situations. You can actually have both great relationships with people that you love and respect and care about, and plenty of time and energy and attention and money for the things that are important to you. You don't have to respond to every urgent request someone else makes of you and still get love and affection and deep connection with them. You can still stand up for yourself, advocate for yourself, be your powerful version, and have wonderful relationships. And oftentimes, standing up for yourself is the thing that creates those wonderful relationships. Sometimes that means saying yes, and you sacrifice a little of something that you wanted in order to help out someone you love. That's okay if you're making that choice from an empowered place and you're doing it for the greater good of your relationship so that it's mutual. But most often, there are a million other ways you can handle a situation other than the first response. So I want you to think about this. Anytime someone makes a request of you or they offer an invitation, don't stop at the initial response. Just consider this their first draft. They are just offering you the first option, and you get the opportunity to adjust or to modify or to come back with another offer and try and work this out and collaborate together. The first offer is just brainstorming. It's just a draft. You don't have to assume that the other person wants you to do exactly the way that they want to do it. You can modify it for you, or you can say no and still be a wonderful person. I've had clients go from avoiding tough conversations with their partners or their kids because they were afraid to hurt the other person's feelings to then standing up for themselves and what they want. And they show up in just this delicious, empowered way where they're showing so much love and so much care, but they're not being a doormat. Because ultimately, that's what people pleasing is. It's letting people walk all over you because you're putting yourself there on the ground in front of them. What it does is actually create deeper connections. You get to be seen for your true self, and you get to own your own emotions and your own experience. And I have felt this too, and I feel this every single day when that people-pleasing urge comes back up and I think, oh, I have to do something in order for this person to like me or in order to get a new client or to do this thing. And I think, no, just slow down. What is in alignment with your integrity? What would help you make the deepest connection? What do you really want to say yes to? And every single time I do this, I come right back to center, and the conversations I have and the interactions with people are so much better. And they feel authentic and they feel genuine and they feel easy and organic and natural. And it doesn't feel icky and gross and like there's all kinds of stuff under the surface. We as highly sensitive people know that that stuff is there. We can sense it. And it just feels so good to be honest and open and to have everything up on the surface. I know that you want to be the kind of person who effortlessly stands up for what you want while also being respectful and kind. And you get to have that. You get to have both. You get to have a highly sensitive life where you stand up for what you want and what's important to you while also honoring and respecting other people's wishes. It's possible and you can do it starting today. So just to recap, we highly sensitive people are very good at anticipating needs and reading a room. So we tend to say yes too quickly until we learn to stop defaulting to people pleasing and we learn to advocate for ourselves and to make decisions. This creates overall schedules that are full or time consuming when you're doing all this people pleasing. It creates feelings of resentment and guilt and spitefulness. We avoid and we hide, and we end up pleasing everyone else at the expense of ourselves. I've been there, and so have my clients, and we've all taken those baby steps over time to create really amazing results. Deep conversations, wonderful boundaries, being on the same page where it felt so tense in the house that you could cut it with a knife. And then they have these deep, vulnerable conversations, and suddenly it's like their relationship is refreshed again. It is possible for you. The 4 steps to stop people pleasing and to start getting these results are to, number 1, pause before you give an answer so you can give yourself time to reflect and regroup. Number 2, take time to decide what you want before you answer. Number 3, communicate your preferences and what you want, whether that's a yes, a no, or we need to talk a little bit more about it. And number 4, detach your emotions from the other person. This is a big one. I could have a whole workshop on this, detaching your emotions from the other person's emotions and reactions. Just try opening up a conversation with a reassessment. It's never too late to change your mind, and you can always listen to this episode again so you can hear that script. Keep putting yourself through hell if you want to, trying to do everything for everyone except for yourself and continue to people please, or you can start advocating for yourself, being in integrity, being authentic, and really showing people who you are and trusting that they're going to love and respect you back. No one can read your mind except for you when you're taking the time to do that. Now, if this episode has been impactful for you, I know this was a long one because I have a lot to say about people pleasing. I think it's a really sticky and dangerous habit that highly sensitive people get into. This is what I help my clients with. This is what I have helped every single one of my clients with at some point or another. And I have been absolutely on fire lately. So creative, just so many ideas of ways that I want to help highly sensitive people. And a lot of that came from a powerful coaching session I had with my coach, standing in all the power and the work that I've done on my mental health and my self-development, learning coaching skills, getting coached, learning new things over the last 10 years. And I've actually invested over $50,000 in my self-development over the last 10 years. That's more than I spent on my college degree. So if you want all of the juice, all the tools, all the programs, and all of this great learning that I have digested over the last 10 years, and you want it exactly when you need it, how you need it for your individual personalized process, I want you to connect with me because I am your person. There are 3 ways that you can do that. And number 1 is I do have one-on-one coaching spots available. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, book your free call on my website, stephanielynn.com, and the link will be in the show notes. And there are a number of ways that I can help you. So if we get on the call, we can do an assessment together, figure out what your biggest blocks are. You'll immediately have some new tips and tricks and tools to start making progress. And then we can decide if we're a good fit to work together or not. I also have upcoming workshops and classes, and my next workshop is something along the lines of how to feel your feels so that you can actually live an empowered, confident life and expand your capacity for all the amazing things available to you. This is a working title, but essentially it's how to actually feel your emotions because so many of us are afraid to feel our feels, especially as highly sensitive people who feel very intensely. You don't have to be afraid of your emotions anymore. You can actually learn to be present with them, to connect with yourself, and to create amazing results afterwards. And if you are not quite ready for a free call or not quite ready for a workshop yet, totally fine. I also am on Facebook and Instagram, and you can sign up for my weekly newsletter so you can connect with me and see all of the cool things that are going on, including my weekly podcast, YouTube, and blog content. So if you want to connect up, you can find me on my website, or you can also find me on Facebook at Stephanie Lynn Coaching and Instagram at Stephanie Lynn Coaching as well. You'll see my red hair, you'll see my blue pictures and all of my cool stuff. And in upcoming episodes, we're going to talk about some more common highly sensitive problems like overstimulation, analysis paralysis, and overwhelming emotions. These are juicy topics. I am so excited to just give you a sample of all of the juice that I have around how to work with these things and to overcome them so that you don't have to let them rule your life anymore. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, for watching the YouTube video, for joining me on my blog and my newsletter, all the ways that you might be seeing this online. And I hope to see you on the next one. Have a good one, highly sensitive person. Thanks for listening. If you're ready to take what you learned today to the next level, head over to StephanieLynn, that's LINN.com, and book a consultation call to get started. I can't wait to see you there, my dear HSP.